Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm here today with a really special guest. I'm very excited. I admit this is a topic that I love to talk about because I'm all about the body, health and wellness, and nutrition, and all of that good stuff. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce and welcome Dr. Michael Haley to the Prime Life Podcast. He is a chiropractor and certified GAPS practitioner that helps people overcome their inflammatory bowel conditions. He owns HaleyNutrition.com and is also the host of the Dr. Haley Show podcast. Dr. Michael Haley, welcome to the Prime Life Podcast. Please let us know why you're here, what you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are doing what you're doing.
Well, first, Mary, thank you for having me on this show. It's a long answer. I'm going to try to condense it. I'm a chiropractor, but I kind of went in a different direction, not by choice. I would say that this different direction fell in my hands. I resisted it. I don't know why. Because the deeper I got, the more I fell in love with what I was doing. I went from giving people chiropractic adjustments, which is also a wonderful, fun thing to do. I love hearing noises coming out of people's bodies, especially their joints. And they leave feeling so good. Yeah, they leave feeling so good. But I had this patient of mine that used to bring these jugs of this certain beverage. I'll call it a beverage for now. And he would say, you got to give this to anyone that had, and he would say this horrible condition that people would suffer from, and it would often take their lives. And I thought he was crazy. And he always said, you got to join me in this mission. And I resisted. And then he passed away at 96 years old, had a heart attack. He was working that day, still kind of a one-man show with a couple helpers around. And I had a patient on that product that was out of options. And she wasn't given much time to live. And there were other changes too. You don't go for a magic bullet approach when you have a disease of any kind. You want to make real life changes. And that's what we did. But we included this one other unique beverage. And that was about 15 years ago, and she's still doing great. So when he died and that product became unavailable, I realized that it was a very important component that we had to make available, make sure it stayed available to the world. So I took it over. It was no easy task, but I've been doing it since and absolutely love working every day. I can't see myself ever stopping until I have to.
Dr. Michael Haley, can you tell us a little bit about what that potion is? I'll call it a potion. I know it's not that beverage. Potion is my word, but that beverage, and talk a little bit about, some of the underlying medical health conditions that you come across in your practice, and why this took you. You said, you're like, I couldn't resist it.
Mary, I'm going to be a little hesitant to say what I'm talking about at this point because I wouldn't want anyone to get sidetracked. I don't want this discussion to be about a magic bullet because it's not.
Yeah, great. That's
I
great.
want this discussion to be about making healthy choices on both sides of the equation. Because what I've found is, imagine that I had a magic bullet, a cure all, and I said, this will fix anything. And you were able to take that and cure all of your health issues. Well, you'd have no reason to change. You would have no reason to get rid of the cause of the problem, which means it would probably come back if you stop taking your magic potion. So, what I like first to do, I want people to understand there's two sides of the equation. One side is all the things that you can do to help yourself get well. The other side of the equation is identifying the things that are getting in the way of that. And I believe that's the more important side of the equation. And it's not always easy to identify those things because something that's very healthy for one person can actually be harming someone else.
So how do
Imagine,
you no. So how do you go about determining that with individuals? Because I think that's a great point. It's actually something that I quite honestly haven't thought of because we think of obstacles, we think, bad things, maybe things that aren't good for you, but you just kind of elaborated that what could be healthy for one person may not be for another. So how do you help someone kind of see where they are versus where they want to go?
it took me so long to figure this out. As a chiropractor, I would see people coming to me with the same issues over and over and over again. I actually had an injury when I was about 18 years old, lifting something very heavy in a very dumb way. I was by myself. I didn't have any help, and I decided I'm going to do this. And I just grabbed onto it and ripped it over my head. And when I had this, it was one of those pull-out couches that have a bed in it with all the heavy steel. And, we're talking 40 years ago. These things were heavy at that time. And now I have it on my head, and I realize I have to go down a flight of stairs in a winding stairwell and then somehow get it on my pickup truck because I was moving. Realizing that I did some serious damage in my back getting that thing over my head. Well, I figured out a way to do it, and then I could barely walk for about the next 8 months until I learned how to take action and repair the damage that I had done. And when I figured that out, all of a sudden, I was completely well in about 2 weeks. But every now and then, it would come back. And it took me years to figure out, to realize there were triggers. And for me, it would be something so dumb, like, for instance, if I was sitting Indian style, working under the sink or something. So it was kind of that bending forward posture. If I spent maybe 10 minutes in that posture, I'd get really stiff getting back up. That posture, I realized, was bad, and it was a trigger to flare up this injury. If I wore a belt too tight, it would trigger it. And there were times I thought, my goodness, what's going on? Why is my back pain coming back? And I could keep going to the chiropractor, or I could, not only take care of myself and keep things moving, but eliminate the triggers. Not wear the tight belt. And if I was sitting on the floor, sit with an upright posture. Simple. Avoid the triggers. What I've realized in that, going into things like gut health, there is always a trigger for your chronic conditions, whether it's a pain or inflammatory bowel condition. People have inflammatory bowels and they're doing so good for 3 years, and then all of a sudden they have a flare up. Well, what caused the flare up? What was the trigger? You have to figure it out. And it could be a food that's considered very healthy, but for you, it causes a flare up. One more, I think of a patient that had chronic knee pain. And if I were to try to fix that naturally, I might think, bone stock soup, and I get all those glucosamine and chondroitin supplements or whatever the case is, trying to decrease the inflammation. I'll take ginger and turmeric, and these things are great. But what if you haven't figured out the cause? For instance, it might be something so simple as I like to sit on the couch and watch the news every night and I kick my feet up on the ottoman. Well, that might be fine for most people, but it could also be stretching the back of your knee, creating an instability that causes knee pain. And until you figure out what it is in your life that's causing your knee pain to flare up, it's going to keep coming back regardless of all the good things you do to try to heal it.
Well, that sounds very familiar to me because I do that. I know my husband does that. We do it with, physical pain, like, again, you were talking about knees and backs and different things, but also digestively. Like, we try to eat, fruits and nuts and all of that. And recently we've, openly discussed like, oh, I don't think that makes me feel good. We also take a lot of vitamins. I'm just, throwing it all out there. A variety of vitamins, as you say. Let me ask you this. Do you ask your clients to write things down so they can determine those triggers, or how do you work with them so they can figure those triggers out, whether they are physical triggers or related to diet? As you said several times, could be healthy for me. I'm making this up, like turmeric. I happen to take turmeric, but maybe it's not so good for someone else. Do they write a diary for several days, or what are some of the techniques that you use with them?
Well, let's use food as the situation. We're wondering what's going on with my digestion issues. Pain might be a different kind of documentation, but let's focus on food for the sake of this procedure. Imagine having a food log that has 3 columns. The first column is simple. It's a date and time stamp. The next column is what you ate. And the third column is how you feel. Now, sometimes you're going to make an entry, what I ate. Sometimes you're going to make an entry, how I feel. You don't necessarily have to document both at the same time. Sometimes you notice I'm crashing, but I didn't eat anything just now. Okay, document that. I have very clear thinking right now. I'm processing this conversation very, very well. I feel very aware of my environment. I feel real present. Document that. I'm tired. I didn't sleep well last night. I have digestive issues. I have a headache. I feel brain fog. Document that. And what we're going to look for is patterns. It might be one of those things where you eat a certain food and you feel great and you don't realize it. It's a food that you really enjoy, but you see a pattern that an hour and a half after you eat that food, I crash every time. Okay, well, now we're developing this pattern. We're looking back and, every time, this time I had tater tots and an hour and a half later I crashed. I had French fries. An hour and a half later, I crashed. I had, this bread made from potatoes. An hour and a half later, I crashed. Okay, you might have a potato allergy, and potatoes might be very healthy for the person next to you, but we're developing a pattern that every time you eat them, you crash. So let's take potatoes and put it on the naughty list for a while and see what happens. I don't crash anymore. Or you might still crash because there's other foods that are similar to that also make you crash.
Are there common conditions or diet-related questions that you get on a regular basis? Especially, our audience is 55 plus. And I say that because I'm curious. We'll go to the potato example. Potatoes have been great for me up until now, and recently, not so much. Is that possible as we get older?
Absolutely.
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years. but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau Insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Yes. We definitely change, and it's very complex too. Certain things, work together. So you might be inflamed from eating wheat, and that causes sensitivities to other things. So it's kind of complex. But when we start developing our good list and we realize when I eat these foods, I feel great, and separating out all the ones that make you feel weak, you'll have less of those conflicts. I think that's the easiest way to really understand it. And it's why, as a GAPS practitioner, one of the principles or practices in getting well is actually eliminating everything, if you could imagine, but one food. Bone stock soup is one of those things that's very nutritious, really meets a lot of nutritional needs, but no one really has a problem with it. I'm sure there's an exception to that. Someone might have to have a vegetable stock, but probably most people could tolerate bone stock. So, and not the stuff you buy from the store, because if you buy it from the store, it will have 10 or 15 other ingredients in it, paprika, salt, pepper, and all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you have a sensitivity to one of those herbs that's in there, but just plain bone stock soup. And then imagine after a few days, you realize, okay, my energy levels are even, my focus is good, I'm present, things are good, my symptoms are decreased, I feel like I've, hit an even keel how I'm supposed to be. And you can have as much of the bone stock as you want. Make sure that, you're meeting your nutritional needs. But once you hit that, okay, everything's good, let's add one thing in. Maybe, cauliflower, or, maybe even chicken off the bones to, just meat it up a little bit. Or maybe quinoa. You're adding one food at a time. And okay, how am I doing? Oh, things didn't go so well. Okay, let's put that on the naughty list. Let's try adding this instead. After you get back to even. Okay, with the cauliflower, I did well. Okay, great. Next day, let's add broccoli. And you start building this soup. And if I could have broccoli, chances are I could have broccoli as a side dish too. And you start building your foods one item at a time. That's an elimination diet where you're gradually adding them back at a time, one at a time. Because if you are just going to go to your food log and your diet is very complex, most people aren't. Most people eat the same things every day. But if you have a very complex diet and you're eating here one day and there, everything kind of interacts with each other, and it's hard to really see what's causing your problems quickly. So that's one of the principles, and it's a great way of identifying the foods that go on your good list and the foods that go on your naughty list.
Please share with our audience the difference between medical versus natural approach to treating bowel conditions, or really just in general, I think, as we talk about, diet and how that all works with digestion.
Yeah, let's make that even broader and say there's actually 3 different ways to go about treating a condition. And we're talking whether it's the flu or cancer or anything else in between. You can do a completely medical approach, you can do an all-natural approach, or you can do an integrative approach. where you do both of them together. And within that integrative approach, there's various levels of integrating. For instance, with medicine, I will take the medicines that I need to, but I might realize that I don't, you're suggesting this one, but we could probably do without it. And you're taking an active role in that medical approach. I don't really need the pain relievers, doc. I'll be okay without that. It's not that bad. Okay, doctor will probably say, okay, if you're okay and you don't need that, that's okay. Doctor, can we do the surgery but hold off on the chemotherapy? Well, this is why I recommend this. If you wanted to wait a couple weeks or, and you work with them. So that would be kind of like a limited integrative approach. So there's your main differences. Now, with that, I would say a medical approach all by itself probably doesn't make much sense in most situations. And here's why. Something made you sick. And in a medical approach, you're, cutting it out, you're medicating it so you don't feel it or so you don't experience the symptoms. You're trying to kill it. If in the case of a tumor, let's attack it with radiation or chemistry and try to kill it. Okay, we shrunk it, it's gone, you're cancer-free. Well, why did you get cancer in the first place? We've never identified the cause. We've never taken corrective action to actually fix the problem of your condition. And again, it doesn't have to be cancer. It could be, chronic infections, cystitis. It could be whatever the case is, any kind of chronic condition that keeps on making its appearance. The role of medicine is a new kind of funny way of looking at this definition of a doctor. What's the job of a doctor? If you really think about it, their job is really to entertain you while God heals you. Now, what do I mean by entertain? Okay, maybe that's a drastic choice of words, but their job is to help alleviate the symptoms while you get healed. Now, we could take a different approach and we can say, no, my job is to just suppress the symptoms the rest of your life. We're never actually going to get well. You're going to take this drug for the rest of your life. I would say that's a pretty lousy medical approach. The reality is a true doctor is going to try to help you while you get healed. And part of that is identifying the cause and getting rid of the cause, getting rid of the triggers so that you can truly be well. Now, we can go the other direction and say, well, what about the all-natural approach? Forget medicine. That may be a good choice some of the time, because remember, if you can eliminate the cause, chances are you're going to get well. But there might be times where medicine has really shown itself to be beneficial for eliminating that condition. And if the condition is so bad that you are beyond recovery, it might make sense to use the medical approaches that are proven to actually work. So you got to balance that. And for any given condition, decide, okay, do I want to do all medicine? Probably not. Do I want to do all natural? Maybe. It depends. Do we want to do integrative? Maybe. And to what extent? Let's figure that out.
Yeah, no, I love that approach. And I love how you laid all of that out. And I think individually, like I can relate to what you said based on what I've experienced with my health and also people in my family. And so I think what I'm hearing too is you have to be open-minded. You have to ask a lot of questions and you have to do some research and you also have to trust yourself and test some things in a very systematic way. That's what I'm hearing from you as, high level. So I really like that because, again, it gives us the options. And I do believe that if we are an active participant in our health and wellness, the better off we will be. That's just my opinion on that.
Absolutely. It's empowering. If you can realize that your condition, you had something to do with it, that's empowering because now you can do something about it.
Oh, absolutely. It's like people will say, I need to lose weight, or I want to try to lower my blood pressure, or I want to try to lower my cholesterol. And, every time you turn around, there are commercials and ads for pharma, which, again, I'm not saying anything against pharma. That said, there are things we can do like exercise and, nutrition. And we've been talking about some of those examples. A little bit of a different direction here, related nonetheless. What is microbiome?
Oh, this is so neat.
Because I don't know what that
Did you know,
is.
Mary? Did you know that you are outnumbered? There are less of your cells than there are of the cells in your microbiome that aren't you. They're part of you because they're living in you.
Oh,
But
interesting.
there's all kinds of bacteria, viruses. And when I say viruses, people say, viruses, isn't that bad? No, some viruses are actually necessary for you to be living right now. There's, archaea, there's probably even maybe worms or funguses, all kinds of living organisms inside you, outnumbering your cells. Now, here's the funny thing. If that's true, when you eat, who are you feeding? You're probably feeding them, not necessarily you.
That
Now,
sounds strange. Please continue to explain.
well, let's go outdoors for a minute with this conversation. If you are watching this on video, you see behind me is a field of aloe vera and some trees and mountains and all kinds of things growing in the background. And these things, like the trees, the big trees in the back that you see in the mountain, they have like big primary roots going into the soil. And off of those roots are like secondary roots that branch out and they're smaller. And then there's these tertiary, even tinier roots branching off, sinking into the soil to get their nutrition. Now, this is important. We're going to bring this back to the human body, and I'm going to convince you that you're actually a tree. But before that, what is soil? You've heard of regenerative farming. See, the problem is a lot of the soil has been sprayed with chemistry, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, pesticides to kill bugs, herbicides to kill weeds, fungicides to kill fungus, and all kinds of things that kill. And they kill the soil. They kill the life in it. They kill the bacteria. They kill the worms. They kill the bugs. And those things are necessary because what they're doing, what all that life is doing, is they're eating things. Like a tree falls down and things grow on it, and they eat that tree and they essentially poop it out. And on that, you're making the bugs are growing, and then animals come eat the bugs and they poop it out. And soil is actually poop. You've heard that worm castings are like the most nutritious soil. What's a worm casting? It's worm poop. Soil is poop. Now, when you spray it with chemicals, you kill it. It becomes dead. So now if you want to grow something, you have to add fertilizers. It'd be much better to nurture the life and just let it keep on recycling, turning over and over and over, continuously making the soil more nutritious. And then the roots that are sinking into the real soil grow really nice, healthy trees and bushes and fruits and vegetables, and you have this Garden of Eden. Well, that's what's happening in your body. You've got this tube that passes through your body. It starts with your mouth and then kind of wiggles through this weird pattern and comes out the other end. We call it the anus. And you put stuff in the front end and it comes out the back end. And in the middle of that are all of these bugs, much like outdoors, fungus and bacteria and probably even worms and archaea, essentially consuming the things that you put in your mouth, and they're pooping it out, making soil. And then you have your intestines that have these folds in them, like villi and microvilli. It's like the folds are like the primary roots, with the villi are your secondary roots, and then the microvilli, like your tertiary roots, sinking into the soil that was made by the living organisms in you so that they can absorb the nutrition and feed your body and turn it into more of who you are. And what are we doing? We're just like outside. We're spraying the soil with pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. We're eating food that's full of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. This is a weird one. We're actually putting preservatives in the food. If I ask most people what's a preservative, they say it's something put in the food to make it last longer. No, it's not. It's something put in the food to kill microorganisms. Because if they can't eat it, the food will not change. And then we're eating it saying, here, microbiome, eat this. And we're killing them with chemistry. That is why so many people are sick. That is why we see so many inflammatory bowel conditions and skin conditions, because your skin is essentially reflective of your gut. Remember, you're like one of those squish bags. You know those toys, the squish bag you'd put on your finger, it's got an opening on each side? That's what your body is. It has bones in it, so you can't roll it back and forth. But other than that, you're like a squish bag with an opening on two ends.
Isn't the skin the largest organ? No?
I think I have heard that.
Maybe that's not true.
But because I'm thinking of the intestines that have this winding thing with all the folds, and then but I don't know.
I do agree. And I liked the analogy that you used with the soil and the trees and all of that and preservatives, because my mom, who's 87, she came from Sicily many years ago, but she would always say that, we eat a lot of things with preservatives and added ingredients that we don't need and that are not healthy for us. And that was something she always said from the time I was a little girl. And, I remember I would say, like, what is she talking about? Because I wanted to eat, what other kids are eating. And she didn't think so. That was a good idea. So, you make a valid point about, what's in our soil, what's in our food. I think that's where you're going a little bit. And so in your discussions with individuals that come to see you, do you talk to them about not just like, okay, I'm going to, like, here's some bread or here's some vegetables, but do you talk to them about, like, I'm going to say, use the word organic versus not organic, or how does that come
sure.
into picture?
Sure.
The picture.
Yeah, if we were to simplify it, it would really be looking at this and saying, is this what I'm about to eat real food? Could I have gotten this 200 years ago? Did it exist in nature? Or did man make it? That's the real difference. Could I have made this 200 years ago, or do I need, chemicals that we've discovered in the last couple hundred years to make this food substance?
Well, like they say, you are what you eat. And I thought I heard you say, are you seeing more conditions within individuals regarding their gut and different skin and, again, internally that
You know what we're
may,
seeing more
yeah,
than ever before is autoimmune conditions.
okay.
For instance, things like Hashimoto's, thyroid issues, these rarely existed 30, 40 years ago. And now we're hearing about them all the time. What is an autoimmune problem? Or what's the cause of autoimmune diseases? If we really look at the, basic part of it, imagine our immune system is attacking our own cells. And the way the immune system works, you have something called an antigen, or something that doesn't belong, and an antibody, something that gets rid of the antigens. So our immune system is constantly looking for things that don't belong to get rid of them. The problem is when it sees something and thinks it doesn't belong, and it gets rid of it, but it really belongs. That's an autoimmune problem.
Okay, that's
And it
very,
could be attacking our joints. It could be attacking our organs that make hormones. It could be attacking our skin. So we have these inflammatory skin reactions. It can be attacking our bowels. It could be attacking our nerves and, eating away at the sheath that protects them, causing degenerating conditions. An autoimmune problem is when your immune system is attacking you. Now, why would it do that? Probably something is in you that looks like it, something that doesn't belong, but it looks very similar to the you, the cells that are you. So that antibody was formed to get rid of this debris. It just so happens to be a key that fits in this other lock as well, which happens to be you. So now it's attacking you as well. Well, how did that substance or that other thing get into my bloodstream and start circulating in my body? That's where we say, okay, probably leaky gut, inflammatory bowels caused by dead soil.
it is,
Oversimplifying it, but
yeah, no, it is interesting because I was at a local news station last week, and I was sitting and waiting for my turn. And these two medical doctors came out. They had a session right before me. They were on air. And I was eavesdropping a little bit as they were leaving. And they were talking about exactly what you said in terms of they're seeing a higher rate, my words, not yours, a higher rate of conditions. And they did talk about thyroid, and they talked about thyroid cancer in much younger individuals. And they were also talking about breast cancer. Again, I wasn't exactly in the mix of the conversation, although when they were leaving, I did comment to them and we did briefly chat about that. So it's just interesting to hear, trends, that are good and that are maybe not so good. So like what's going on in our environment, what's going on in the food we're eating. So I really do appreciate that you kind of went down that path today, because I think we're hearing more about it, even as it relates to individuals who are in the medical profession like yourself and others. And then, of course, just as regular consumers, we want to know, we want to try to live longer, live better. That's what we say on Prime Life podcasts, right? Living longer, living better. So how can I do that? So
yeah.
Dr. Michael Haley, as we kind of get to the end, give us a few tips or insights that you want to leave our listeners with before we get to our very last question that we love to ask all of our guests.
Well, if it comes down to what can you do to get well, there's really only 4 areas to really focus on: nutrition, exercise, rest, and mental well-being. Now, as a chiropractor, I might throw in there also the properly functioning nervous system. getting rid of the physical stress that gets in the way of your nerves communicating with your body. But really, all of these things affect your chemistry. The things you eat affect your body chemistry. When you exercise, you're affecting your chemistry. When you sleep, you're affecting your chemistry. When you have thoughts, you're affecting your chemistry. Happy thoughts, laughter create good chemistry. Negative thoughts create bad chemistry. You can actually change your chemistry, which is really your nutrition, by the way you think. So regardless, and then you can expand each of those areas too. Like, okay, when he said exercise, I feel like maybe that's what's wrong with me, and that's where I need to focus. Or when he said nutrition, that's where I need to focus. You can take one of those categories and say, okay, well, let's explore that a little further. You thought exercise. Okay, what kind of exercise? Do you need endurance training? Do you need strength training, agility, which is balance and coordination? Do you need the kind where you really sweat to detoxify? Do you need flexibility training? Oh, when you said flexibility, that's my weakness. Okay. So, as you start expanding these categories and identifying your areas where you need improvement, focus on those and take corrective action today, because we can invest in our wealth, but why if we are not investing in relationships and health to where we can really enjoy the wealth? We can invest in our health, but not invest in our wealth and our relationships. What good is being alive if you don't have relationships and you can't enjoy living? They all work together. So you need to identify these areas so that you can make change and invest in your health so that you can enjoy those other areas of your life. So I would encourage people that are lacking, needing help, to invest in their health. You can be younger tomorrow than you are today. You could have better health tomorrow than what you have today. And rinse and repeat and start living.
Well, I love that. That's great advice. And you've inspired me. And of course, when you were like, do you need agility or, the different options that you've laid out, flexibility, I was like, yeah, I need all of those. But I do try every day. I am, and those that have listened to this podcast know that I am a big proponent of exercise. I started my career in the health and wellness business. It still keeps me sane. And when you said mental health, you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Michael Haley. It all works together. And we've heard that from other guests as well. So I really appreciate that you kind of tied that up in a really nice little bow. But before we let you go, we do have a final question, and then we're going to let you inform our guests the best way to get in touch with you. You are a chiropractor. You've done a lot of interesting things in your life. You can do really whatever you want. Why do you wake up every day and do what you do? What is your why?
It's so funny because I really resisted doing what I do. Rodney Stockton, every time he came to see me for a chiropractic adjustment, I thought I was living the life. I loved seeing patients and doing chiropractic. And it wasn't until he passed away that I realized I had to rescue this product. The reason why I do what I do, I was called to do it. I never realized, and the calling kept on knocking, first in the form of Rodney Stockton, and then by absolute need to rescue an aloe vera product. I never realized how much I would enjoy doing what I'm doing until I was forced into it. And it's the coolest thing. Everyone that works here, they love coming to work. We get to talk to our customers, and we are thanked literally every day in a unique way. What you guys have done for me, you changed my life. It is so fulfilling. I couldn't see myself not coming to work. I love coming to work, and it's truly a blessing.
Well, that's a great answer, very inspirational. And when you just said, like, people tell us, thank you, you've changed my life. That is one of the best reasons to want to continue what you're doing. And I just love that. So thank you for sharing that. Dr. Michael Haley, if individuals want to get a hold of you, what is the best way? We will put everything else in our show notes, of course.
HaleyNutrition.com, HALEY nutrition.com. And there's a contact form there. I believe our phone number is still on the website as well. And you can always ask whoever answers the phone, ask if you can speak to Dr. Haley. And if I'm not available then, they'll actually schedule a 15-minute phone call.
Appreciate that. Dr. Michael Haley, thank you again for joining me on the Prime Life podcast. It's been a pleasure. Perhaps we can have you on again and maybe go in a slightly different direction. And to our listeners, please give us feedback, follow us, engage with us. And we look forward to being with you on another episode of the Prime Life podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.